Welcome back, everybody. You got Will and I-Man here, and today we're going to be talking about the Nat.Fun launch.
Yes, which was supposed to be today.
Supposed to be.
If you watched our podcast on Saturday, right? Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, we talked about, without internet, of course,
Yeah.
what the platform is to be and why it is, but we weren't able to effectively show anything because the internet was down during that recording.
Yeah, so for the last couple of weeks, we've been testing it, and with tests, we find some bugs that we need to fix, and as we fix them, we find more bugs.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, there's a lot of, creepy crawlies about.
That's right.
We should probably not launch yet. So
Yeah.
hopefully within, the next 5 to 7 day time window, things, all those bugs should be squashed because we want, the best user experience possible. And, doesn't always have to be perfect at launch. It's kind of the point. You want to launch because inevitably, even if you think you squashed them all, more will arise post-launch. Right?
Yeah, not only that, as people use it, they'll find bugs that we didn't find. So
yeah, true. And plus, the most critical value unlock really is getting, real user feedback from people. You guys, you're going to be the first users, onboarders to experience what Nat.Fun is. So
yeah,
we need that critical data to make adjustments and, iterate down the line because we want this thing to be, something truly special because I feel like the space is lacking exactly that.
absolutely. There's a lot less innovation these days as there was in the past.
Right. All right. So walk us through the innovation here, dude. You're talking a lot of big talk.
Right.
I mean, that's probably what some people think when we describe Nat.Fun. It's like, wow, you guys have been talking about this for a while.
Right.
How about you show me some stuff?
All right, so here it is. This is the platform,
Yeah.
and so this is what you'll be greeted with as soon as you go to Nat.Fun. Not right now. You're just going to be greeted with a teaser page at the moment, but go ahead, go to Nat.Fun and actually register your social media account. That way you can actually get a block here. But yeah, this is it. So expect some data here to be implemented for the UNAT market and NAT market. So if this is the first time you're understanding these words, the UNAT means unique non-arbitrary token, which is an NFT that is non-arbitrary, right? So we had to give it a name, right? So it's UNAT. And then a fungible token in the non-arbitrary sense is a non-arbitrary token. It's a NAT.
Right.
Hence the Nat.Fun platform name.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a culture twist happening here that, it's going to maybe take some of you guys a little bit longer than others to adjust to, but not really. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still fungible and non-fungible tokens across the platform, but it is the first platform, to our knowledge, that exists that launches both assets simultaneously. Therefore, the dual market appeal, right, which is genuinely a new, offering. Because what we've seen is like there's platforms that launch coins, Pump.Fun, these are meme coins, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's other platforms where you typically launch an NFT from, like, OpenSea.
Yeah.
But, those are separate, distinguished markets that typically don't really have any real interplay.
Yeah, and I hear the NFT markets is dying.
Correct.
So what are we doing, dude?
Yeah, it's either we're just playing, dice rolls all day. We're over there, in the alleys just doing this. I don't know how to play dice, but I imagine
That's close enough.
Yeah, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
Hopefully that didn't trigger anything else beyond just trying to shake up some dice.
Yeah.
Definitely gonna be some gifts made out of that one.
Some AI adaptations. Yeah. Please, for sake my my personal brand. But yes, so we don't want to do that. We want to actually reinvigorate interest in NFTs again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
I feel like we're not alone.
No. And NFTs, the market is sort of dead, but the technology of NFTs is not dead. This is actually still useful, guys.
Yeah.
So here we are. So what does this platform do? So you launch a fungible token, and it's supposed to be a viability test for an NFT collection.
Yeah.
And so you launch this token. It's on the bonding curve, as we've all seen for the last year and a half or so. But in this case, that if it graduates, NFTs get distributed to all the token holders. So that's what this represents.
Yeah.
And all this is built on top of Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin has the 17-year history, and it's been producing blocks for the last 17 years. In about a year from now, there's going to be 1 million blocks on Bitcoin. And that substrate layer contains patterns that sometimes reoccur again. And those patterns are being used to launch fungible tokens against. And therefore,
Yeah.
when you launch against Bitcoin's block data, these are non-arbitrary in the same way that the hydrogen, what makes up hydrogen is non-arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
Because if you were to modify hydrogen, all of a sudden everything in the whole universe breaks down.
Yeah, so that from our lens is like Bitcoin's hidden like superpower is this like uncorruptible substrate that we can anchor digital existence to, which is what we're actively doing on this platform, and we hope to further proliferate that idea because we think that version of crypto is just it's better than spinning things up out of thin air. Basically, she's like, some human out there just decided there's going to be 10 million of these. It gets programmed into some kind of smart contract, and that's it. That's the logistics behind what exists and what does not.
Right.
In this case, everything's anchored to Bitcoin, which is, I mean, it's Bitcoin. It's the most powerful representation of like humanity's digital efforts, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
So we should anchor, substance to that, which we've done.
It's just a parallel. We have physics. We all abide by the laws of physics. And so in this case, with non-arbitrary tokens, we all abide by the physics of Bitcoin.
Right.
So what's cool about the platform is that when you're minting these fungible tokens, you're swapping these tokens. The swap is going into the bonding curve, and you're getting a supply of fungible tokens. But you're also getting a supply of the NFTs that are supposed to be distributed if it graduates. So that means that if you buy 1% of the supply of the fungible tokens, you'll have 1% of the NFTs that are that will be allocated to you. And once it graduates, then you'll go through an unblocking experience, basically an unboxing. And so this is kind of like a representation of that. And so there's like a Easter egg here that if you highlight all this and copy and paste it, you'll find that this is the Genesis block of Bitcoin. Just for those nerds out there.
It's very nerdy, dude. Very nerdy.
Yeah. So
I think Brian Armstrong would approve of this.
Yeah.
He's sending out like Coinbase cards.
That's right.
With this like grilled onto them.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's the representation of the data, right?
Yeah. So when you're minting that 1% of the fungible tokens, you're getting 1% of the NFTs, but it's really 1% of the blocks that represent that collection against Bitcoin.
Right.
And so these represent the blocks that you would own. And then of course it's both for creators and collectors. There's a handy playbook guide for both sides of the market here.
Yeah, which maybe we'll go through like on a podcast, not so much here, but it's there whenever this platform does launch, hopefully within the next 5 to 7 days or so. Yeah, I recommend you start it there if you want to get like as deep of an understanding, what the primitives are, the new primitives to this platform, and like, I guess the expected market behavior around that, because, this is unique. If you never launched a meme coin before, you got to understand there's like some expectations around that as far as like, deploy creator responsibility, you got community management, different communication protocols, I would say.
Yeah, expectations, especially by the community.
Yeah.
And this isn't like a typical NFT launch that has like some pre-hype campaign and like you set prices and like none of that stuff works now. And actually you could argue it didn't work in the past, even though, $50 billion of value flowed through that. But this is a new mechanism, right? This hasn't been tested before. So we're testing this thesis live. And so finally, you'll be at the end. It's if you wanted to create a collection and you don't necessarily know how, at first glance, it's kind of complex. It requires code.
That's very complex.
Yeah,
for most people, right?
And so it requires code. It's essentially a script that generates the outputs.
Yes.
And so it's like, well, do I have to generate a script? How can I do that?
A couple of years ago, you did.
Yeah, you did.
We went through a whole UNAT phase of discovery, basically pre-AI.
Yeah.
Where that was happening. It was very much, a gated experience. The whole creator economy basically was, you had to have these attunement skills.
Yeah, if you could script, you could make money.
Yeah, you could produce, creative value, and people did. We had a lot of UNAT collections, probably like 100 or so of them produced. But yeah, like now we live in the AI age. now like access has significantly increased. Like who can
Yeah.
get exposure to this reality, right? So we intentionally are building this into the platform.
Yeah, so there's a tool that we built in that allows you to vibe create a collection. And so you just interface with an AI. I want to create some sort of collection. It's
Yeah.
about cyberpunks or whatever. And it'll develop all the layers for you, pack it all into its design layers, and you can just build this against
Yeah.
data on Bitcoin, and it does it all for you.
Yeah, that too. It factors in the non-arbitrary substrate. So like traditionally NFTs come with their own rarity, dispersion throughout the collection. But
Yeah.
again, that's been arbitrarily derived in pretty much all cases. Now leveraging Bitcoin as that substrate anchor, all these different rarity allocations are contingent on patterns that exist on Bitcoin, which is pretty cool. And you don't have to do the personal forensics to find these associations. Like you could prompt the AI,
That's right.
let it know your rarity schema,
Mm-hmm.
your desired one, and it will find these pattern associations on your behalf.
Yeah, you could get really granular. Say, I have this trait that when the nonce value has a 666 in it,
Go
show me horns, right? My
Yeah.
horn trait.
put it on fire,
Yeah.
or something like that, something hellish, right?
Yeah. So, and you could get that granular where it's like it's to the specific data point on Bitcoin,
Yeah.
or you just let the AI sort of like make these decisions for you.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. And it's going to be a new experience for everyone, myself included. As we were testing this, I've never created anything of real substance. And I was shocked. Like within a couple hours, I was able to have a conversation flow with this
Yeah.
AI. And I arrived to something of some semblance of a collection. And I was
right.
surprised. And then all the code is there. I didn't write any of it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I could do it, I think virtually anybody can.
Yeah.
But of course, once you see my example, you're not going to be blown away. I was, just because of the idea that I was able to even generate something.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
mind blowing to me.
Yeah.
But it makes you understand and extrapolate from there. Like, what else can I make if I actually dedicate some more effort?
Yeah. Some more effort. Yeah.
More than 2 hours, right?
And so we're actually going to show you an example of what that looks like here. But all right, that's it. So once you kind of understand like the premise of the platform, this is what it looks like. So these are just examples. When this launched, it won't be there. But here is one example that I did called the Nat
Nats.
Turtles.
I love these guys, dude. They look more like actual gnats, like bugs.
Yeah.
Like those little flying little fuckers out there.
Yeah.
Those little gnats.
The
Yeah,
little
like
annoying gnats. Yeah.
yeah. But to you, they're turtles.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Every time I look at these lads, dude, I get a little chuckle.
Yeah.
And
And so this is the page where you actually mint the fungible token. And so the experience is the same. You just like place the order here, and you actually swap the tokens. And
But there's something different there, right? Whenever you slide the scale, it tells you, it adds another layer of importance, right? You're not just
correct.
claiming a supply of tokens.
Yeah. So you can see here I'm moving the slider, and let's say I move it to something around 4. I'm purchasing. Right, I'm spending 4 SOL to acquire this amount of TERT tokens, and I'm also gaining 320 blocks. And so what that looks like is if I make that purchase, that 320 blocks goes into my inventory.
Damn, there they are.
And so that's my whole inventory of this particular block collection. And so once this graduates, assuming I still maintain my supply here, all of these turn into real NFTs, and they can be NFTs as Bitcoin ordinals or as Solana NFTs. So it's really up to the creator to decide what that is.
Yeah.
And so what is this little widget here? So this widget here represents what the collection could look like if people like it, right? So we're assuming that if people do like it, number will go up because people like it,
Yeah.
right? And if number continues to go up, it reaches that threshold, graduates, and these NFTs get issued to you. Yeah. And if people don't like this, then number will go down, which will send a signal to the creators like, I guess people don't like this collection, so let me make my modifications via the Vibe editor.
Yeah.
And let's see if people like it then, right?
Yeah.
And so this is basically like a real-time feedback strip of data from the potential output of this collection.
Right. So that's why you only see a vibe here through this carousel, but your actual inventory it's static because the vibe hasn't been cemented into an actual deployment yet. And that's
Right.
kind of like the game, I guess, that's happening here on Nat.Fun, like at least during the pre-blockout stage, right? Which is, this is what it is. This is the block pad.
Yeah.
So that has all the relevant details as far as like what the collection is about, what the creator's about. Here are all the relevant blocks that have patterns associated to this collection, Bitcoin blocks.
Yeah.
Right? And I think even at the bottom right, you can see the pattern occurrence widget that shows,
Yeah.
like when these patterns occurred throughout Bitcoin's history, right? So
Yep.
this is all the relevant information you need to essentially gauge your interest in a project, right? Outside of all the extra things like, what is the creator even about? Like how they, their vision, how they communicate, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, correct. And this section here, the grid here, the block pad, you could see that from my inventory, I have this like huge collection, and I am represented on this block pad with these icons here. So these are the 3 blocks I actually own in this collection here. And so the idea is that if multiple people own a bunch of these blocks, you'll see them on the block pad. So you could see who's in there and
it's basically
what the influence is.
It's an archive of who owns what, right? Because once this thing graduates or blocks out, in our case, like you're set in stone, like who was a participant during this blockout, right?
Right.
So it's a blockout map. So if something happens whenever a blockout occurs, right? Like this changes, this interface.
Yes, this changes. So I can show you another one. So TJ, if you'll allow me, I'm going to switch to this other one, and I'm going to make this modification so we can see what the...
Yeah, so assume you were the creator of the Nat Turtles, and, people just didn't vibe with your collection, and somehow it ended up ninjas.
Yeah.
Over time.
Yeah.
Just because, like, damn, the market hated those turtles, I guess. But I turned them into ninjas, and now I blocked out.
I blocked out, right.
So this is what actually happens, right?
Yeah. So the grid, this familiar grid that I showed you before, it converts into a secondary NFT marketplace. And so once it graduates, this is what you'll see. So some people haven't unblocked their NFT yet, so it's hidden, but others have. And so there's a filter function here where you can actually filter for the traits. And I can show you, like, for example, the arm wear left color is red. And so now you just see that particular trait.
Right.
So it's a full-on secondary marketplace along with the fungible token that you can still purchase once it's moved to the new DEX environment.
Hence dual market, right?
That's right.
So yeah, this gives you like a nice nifty gateway to the entire, the value of this project that's happened. Again, it's 2 asset classes in one, and giving you 2 double-sided upside exposure.
Yeah.
To the value of whatever this creator's producing, right? Because, what NFTs allow are for, a little bit more of like a scarcity angle to the value of a creator. And
identity and, it adds a lot of value to your community.
Yeah, and your brand,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, but the coin itself, that is the mechanism of, how you convert attention to value and then therefore build community from that, right? Like meme coins have powerfully demonstrated that capability.
Yeah, and the whole idea is as the creator launches these things, when volume occurs on the fungible token and on the NFTs, those fees go to pay the creator. So that way the creator's aligned with the community. The creator's not going to dump their tokens or anything like that. It's just as long as the creator sticks around and creates interest from the community, engagement, all that stuff, there will be volume on the token to continue funding the creator to continue building.
Yeah.
And this platform isn't focused on just the NFTs, right? It could be a supplement to the movie that you're creating, right? And so let's say you launch a token that is supposed to fund your independent movie, and you build a collection that supports that movie, and you launch on this platform, and you're kind of killing 2 birds with one stone with the funding of your movie with like a unique collection that supports the movie itself.
Yeah, so that implies, from the vibe point of view, a vibe feed that's being populated based on, possibly the attempts at iteration to producing this said movie, right? Like that would be very useful information for the market to determine whether or not I want, in or not on this market opportunity. And
That's right.
that's what we want to facilitate, right? Is basically give the market the most earliest of entry at any kind of digital value that's producible from AI or not. But in most cases moving forward in this, AI economy, most things of value will probably be AI derived.
Yeah.
Whether it's a collection of art, a video of some kind, they're probably mostly all going to be rooted in utilizing some sort of, AI model,
Yeah.
right, to produce these things. And we think the thesis here is giving the market the opportunity to not just get first point of view access at the construction of these things, but also, signal relay feedback to the creators themselves through these market devices like Nat.Fun. So that's like a whole new symbiosis between market and product that hasn't existed before. And we think it could be very valuable, right?
Yeah, and on top of this platform, since it's a dual token platform, this is the first time that we're experimenting, that anyone is experimenting with a dual economy where you have the fungible token essentially at the top. The fungible token chart is here, as you would expect it from traditional platforms. But then at the bottom is the non-fungible marketplace. And so in the same page, you could get into the fungible token because you want that exposure, or add these to your actual cart here and purchase the NFTs. So ultimately, this is what it looks like when this is on the bonding phase, and again, it goes into your inventory, and then once it graduates, then it looks like a traditional NFT marketplace. And the people who own these NFTs, they set the price, right? So essentially these NFTs, you receive them essentially for free, right? You're buying two assets with one purchase. Yeah. And so it is kind of important to be in on the early bonding stage so that you get acquired these assets, and then you decide, what the market decides what the price is for these NFTs.
Yeah. So we're going to make a part 2 video here pretty soon for those of you who actually, want to play.
Yeah.
Like how to actually get started, and we're going to demo like a whole vibe from start to completion, right? But we can't do it here. But if you have some sort of this is it. This is the interface to create your vibes.
Yeah, so these are all my vibes I created during testing, and I'll show you Nat Tumbos here, but let me show you Nat Turtles, the one that we showed before. Yeah. And so this is the editor here, right? So on the left is the AI chat. And you can see here that you can just sort of see all the different iterations, and it populates the vibe feed. Right. So you could actually publish this live, and then in the minting interface, you'll see the live feed sort of updated in real time.
So this is what you want to do to broadcast essentially to the market, like new iterations, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to change the color scheme, or now I'm going to make these guys a little bit more higher fidelity. Yeah. Because I leveled up my understanding of how this tool works, whatever. Yeah. I could do that. And then I could go to the AI assistant here on the left, vibe that out. It generates the code in the middle. Yep. And therefore, that's what produces the output here on the right. And then once I'm satisfied with that result, might take an hour, might take a whole day, or 20, whatever, to get to the desired result, whatever it is, publish it so that the market can see what you're up to. And therefore, again, signal very valuable information on whether you're headed down the right path or not.
Yeah, right. And there's this little button here that is called block data, and then you can see I'm on block number 4, and we give you all the block data that's in number 4 for you to utilize for a particular pattern that you want to kind of leverage for a trait.
Yeah, so it's all there.
Yeah, it's all here. So now let's just show a few more examples. At Tumbos. Now this one we were using AI to generate images. And so some of these are pretty competent in terms of the outputs here.
They look like little gumdrops.
Yeah.
Little candy corns.
So then this is me just like trying to come up with different stress tests. Right. And then finally I arrived at the one that I like. It's the cyberpunk version. And so now with AI, I generated layers, and I position those layers properly so that they're layered in a way where it's like competent, right? It's a competent PFP project. So as you can see here, different permutations of the outputs yield this like cyberpunk character,
Mm-hmm.
and so this is like the extent to the complexity that you could create. And remember, because this is code, these could be animated, right? So these don't necessarily need to be static images, right?
Right.
They could be dynamic. It could be like an independent game or whatever, right? And so this is just an example of like the extent of creativity that you could build here.
Yeah. Yeah. So this tool is going to improve over time. You know, the system prompts behind all these different categories you're describing here, right? Whether it's very simple, what do they call it? SVG art.
Yeah.
Which is basically just shapes
Yeah.
put together in code to produce art, or these layered images that make, things of higher complexity. And then, the spectrum goes on and on and on from here of like things you can create.
Yeah.
And
We're not
vibe
even
from.
scratching the surface with what this could do.
And that's going to be our focus, right? Is to activate as much, creative potential as possible, because we want to see like a shit ton of vibes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nonstop. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, and all this helps. It guides you. This AI, we've designed it to where it guides you to build, these complex outputs, and it doesn't take too much effort to get something as cool as this.
Right. Yeah. So this is a whole new dynamic for the NFT market, not just from how these assets are being produced and how they exist and how they're distributed, but also like who gets to even participate.
That's right.
Because last cycle, I was just an observer.
Yeah.
This cycle, I think I'm going to play.
Yeah.
Because of this tool, right? I could see myself actually coming up with something of value.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I never thought was possible before. I'm making AI videos now.
That's right. Yeah, and they're very good.
I'm waiting to launch a token.
Yeah.
For one of my videos. Right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I don't know which video it will be.
Right.
But it's coming one day.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to, refine my chops a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I want to vibe a video. I want people watching me as I vibe it. And then let's build something cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, so what we showed you today is just the MVP, right? This is like what we thought was viable in the market, and this is going to be a completely huge experiment to kind of release out there. This is definitely something not been tried before. We've been working on this for months. We were surprised that no one's done this yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising yet not surprising, right? It's just across the entire industry, there's just a lack of effort across the board.
Yeah.
Right? So, but these are the times and the periods within the market cycles where, again, the ones who are actually about something,
They show up.
They show up, and
Yeah.
we've been here for almost 8 years now. So
Yeah.
this is our big show up moment. So yeah, hopefully you guys like it whenever this does launch. I mean, you definitely will be there.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah,
so,
receiving the feedback.
Yeah.
All right, well, let us know if you have any questions or suggestions on the platform. I appreciate you for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.
Peace.